Kia ora, everyone. Can you hear me? Teresa, would you like to welcome everybody now?
Tēnā koutou katoa. Welcome to this network meeting, which is a very important one, in which the leadership group are really interested in getting your feedback on what our priorities should be for 23-24. So I'll start with the prayer here with a karakia. Whakataka taho ki te uru, whakataka taho ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai. E hia ki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei, Māori ora.
Kia ora.
Welcome. So I'm just going to hand you over to the team because they've got a bit of explaining to you on the format for today. So once again, welcome.
Kia ora koutou. Ko Stephen Jacobs ingoa. I'm sort of facilitating this morning. Just to introduce myself, I'm a senior lecturer in the School of Nursing at the University of Auckland and a volunteer with the New Zealand Dementia Foundation. And today we're basically going to be looking at what you've already looked at exploring a bit more what you came up with last time. And Susan is going to now talk about the actual process you're going to go through, and then I'll come back to you. Over to you, Susan.
Stephen, tēnā koutou katoa, Susan G. toko ingoa. So today's meeting is all about planning the next steps in our journey together. And that's a journey where the destination, the vision for us is laid out in the Dementia Mati Wareware action plan. And we've also laid out our own vision, or our manifesto, if you like, which we laid out at our first network meeting. So we've got this really strong foundation. We have our dream, we have our vision, and now we're moving on to our practical steps. So the first three areas for action have been decided on by the government, and as you're well aware, in the 2022 budget, the government set aside $12 million to support some action plan projects, and those are in the areas of post-diagnostic support, navigation, and respite care. And just an aside, because we know that the network has said they really want to be kept in the loop about those projects, when that decision gets announced, we will be inviting the successful groups to come and present to the network, and we hope that will be on an ongoing basis. So what steps might be next in the meantime? Well, the Dementia Mati Wareware Leadership and Advisory Group have put forward three next areas for action, and Dr. Matthew Croucher talked to us about that at our last meeting. So they are brain health, the workforce, and diagnosis. So those are obviously things that have been identified in the action plan, but they're also things that we as a network identified in our conversations. So for brain health, it's about designs for health promotion programs for different groups, because we want to promote brain health. And for the workforce, it's about strategies to improve capacity, so we have enough workers and capability so that they're trained well. Because we want to have well-trained, person-centered professionals right through the dementia journey. And for diagnosis, it's about ways that we can improve timely and accurate diagnosis, because that's been identified as a really strong priority for this network. So we've got our areas for action, and today you can think of it as being that we're coming together to put forward some of the steps for a work plan. What are the specific steps that we can be taking to make progress towards those goals. So at the meeting last time, there was time for the communities of interest to get together and brainstorm. So it was kind of all about quantity, but today it's about quality. It's about choosing the top ideas. What ideas are achievable and would make a big impact? Now, some of those are going to be things that would make a big impact, but they're going to need funding. So that means that really the step on our work plan is that the ecosystem through the leadership group is going to make a recommendation for funding for those specific ideas. But some ideas will be things that we can do right now, particularly with the power of the network behind us. So do keep an eye out for those things that we can get up and running. So really, we can think about today as being choosing what we think will be our pedal, what will push us forward the most. Because we talk about He Waka Eke Noa. This is a canoe that we are all in together. So you, as a community of interest, are going to be putting forward your idea for the pedal that will be the most impact for pushing us forward, and we'll be putting those together, many pedals together to move that waka. So today, when you get into those groups, it's going to be a focus on choosing your strongest concrete ideas. So the first step will be review all those ideas that the group came up with at the last meeting. And there's going to be a link that will show up in your chat. And that if you click on that, you'll be able to see the summary that you provided as a group from that last meeting. Your next step is going to be to narrow down. So what specific steps are going to be achievable and have the most impact? And just a gentle reminder that we have our goals, we have our dreams. This is about the steps that will get us there. So once you come back into the big group, you'll have chosen one or more people from your group to present your idea. So a bit like Dragon's Den, that you're going to present a clear idea and a strong argument about why you chose that one or maybe more step as being the one that you're recommending. So unlike Dragon's Den, as we say, this is not a competition. We will be putting all the ideas together in a kind of a briefing paper about the proposed work plan that we'll be putting forward to the Dementia Leadership Group. So I'm going to hand you back over to Stephen, who's going to take you through the specific steps for getting into those communities of interest.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Susan. That was very clear, I thought. So, and I hope everybody else did too. So what's going to happen now, Bevan's going to put up a slide which talks about the next process. But basically, there are 9 communities of interest, and each community of interest has a breakout room. And some of you would have been in the community of interest breakout rooms last time. If not, please choose one that suits you. The idea in your community of interest is that you basically, and you'll find the breakout rooms at the bottom of your screen. And if you click on the breakout room sign, it'll take you through to a list of breakout rooms. Bevan, can you shift to the next one? And you'll see that there are 9 breakout rooms, and you can decide which one you join. So when you want to join it, click on the join button. Then click on the got it button. Once that box comes up, got it, that's the room I want. And in that room, you will find there is a chat function, and you can look in that chat function to see a summary of your discussion from the last time. And you can also use that chat box if you need help with anything, and someone will come and help you. So the key task, just remembering the key task in your group, and you've got 20 minutes, is to talk with each other about what it is that you want to have as your paddle. What do you think will drive the dementia, your community of interest forward, the thing that you want to drive forward in your community of interest? What's that paddle? And one or two of you, preferably one, well, it's up to you. One or two of you will then present to the whole group what your paddle is and why you've chosen that paddle. I hope that's really clear. So your first step is to go into the breakout room, look on the list, choose the breakout room you want to go into, and in your community of interest, work together to decide what is your paddle, and then to also choose a spokesperson who will present that to the group when you come back into the larger group. You have 20 minutes.
Catherine has a question.
Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Stephen. I have two questions, actually, so I will do my best to not take too long. The first question is, if any of us are of the view that the advisory group should think about a fourth priority to focus on, how do we do that? And my second question is actually about the communities of interest, because I've had quite a bit of feedback that people are struggling to find a community of interest that is relevant to them. And so people have, I know that several Alzheimer's New Zealand people found themselves in the same community of interest last time and were the only people in that group. So I'm just wondering about how we kind of navigate that. I know that in the material that you sent out beforehand, you indicated that there were ways that we could get around that issue, but certainly from my perspective, I would be interested in a different community of interest than the options that are there. So yeah, how do we navigate those two things?
So first,
we'll need to pick that one up in the longer term. This is Shireen Maloney here. I'm the Chief Executive of the New Zealand Dementia Foundation. We'll need to pick that second point up, Catherine, in the longer term. What we've got here today is a process that was started a couple of meetings ago, and the communities of interest were designated by the network itself. And I understand, I absolutely accept that people have had issues with that, and I had communication from the people that you're talking about actually about that this week. But we have a process underway that we need to complete today, which is we talked about the priorities that the leadership group had set at the last meeting, and the idea for this meeting is that people go back into the same communities of interest that they attended at the last meeting, albeit that there was that one dementia-friendly communities which didn't have people in it, enough people in it last time. And we've talked with those people this week about what they can do about that. But if people can go into the groups that were in last time and complete the process of determining the actions that they want to recommend to the leadership group, and then we'll come back to the network at a subsequent meeting and talk about how are we going to manage the communities of interest going forward, and figure out together a better process for that.
Okay.
And in terms of the fourth recommendation, if you do have burning recommendations that you want to make, just make them. And also, you know, if there's more than one or two, just make them. We just didn't want a big, we can't take action on a whole lot of recommendations. So we just need to narrow down to the ones that the network think are the biggest priorities, will have the most impact to get going with. Everything will be picked up along the way as we work through the implementation of the action plan over the years. And I just want to say, if you can't pack everything into your presentation at the end of this, when you come back to the main group, then you can email us with your recommendations as well. Stephen, did you want to say something further?
Well, I think given the time frame, that I think Catherine, it probably best if you email or text the New Zealand Foundation, Dementia Foundation, with the issues that you have so that they can follow them up.
Yeah.
But today, I don't know what you do, Catherine, if you don't fit in any of the 9 groups. But can I suggest that
I think I'd fit in all of them, Stephen.
Okay.
That's the challenge, I think. I suspect that's a challenge for many people.
I think that is a challenge. Yeah, I can understand that. Can I suggest that today you throw a dart and choose one? Choose the one that you can really feel like you can be engaged with today, and we'll get those groups underway. Because there is an urgency about getting the recommendations to the leadership group, basically,
Yeah.
for the next phase of their work. So we're going to go into the process of you choosing a group, and then you will have 15 to 20 minutes to discuss that and figure out what the paddle is for that community of interest. What is the thing that you think would make the most positive contribution to the people that community of interest is focused on? Okay, so is everybody back now? Gallery. Ah, yes, I think so. Hello, welcome back. I hope you had good discussions. What's going to happen now is that we're going to go through each group and ask for their what they decided was their paddle and their rationale for that. So I hope that everybody understands that process. So one speaker from each group, and you'll get 6 minutes to talk about what did you decide is the thing that you wanted to have as the paddle that drives your community of interest forward in the short term. So can we please start with, I'll just name the groups, I'll just call them. Can we please start with navigation?
Kia ora koutou, I wasn't expecting to go first, so here goes. So I think to start with, we have approached this slightly differently than we were asked to. So hopefully that will still make it useful. But as a navigation group, our view is very strongly that the single most important thing that we need to be dealing with just at the moment is improving timely diagnosis. And we believe that because it is absolutely vital for the person with dementia mate wareware and for their family to know if something is wrong, and if so, what that journey looks like, and to start to plan for the future. It is a threshold point for getting access to services. Without a diagnosis, there are so many things you can't get access to, so it's vitally important. You also can't plan your journey without diagnosis. And without a diagnosis of dementia, you risk having avoidable complications if you have other health problems or you're in secondary or tertiary care. So for all of those reasons, for us, access to timely diagnosis is really important. Now, we had 3 things that we thought were steps on the way to getting to that. The first of those, and forgive those of you who are clinicians, forgive me for saying this, but let's not make dementia diagnosis quite so complicated, particularly for our old. Secondly, there's no question that the primary care sector needs to get its act together, and that requires a new funding mechanism. That's not something that the dementia community can drive on its own, but we can certainly support that in that primary care space. The third thing is about consistency around the navigation process, so that walking alongside, particularly at the beginning of the process, in order to support and assist people to get a diagnosis at that very early stages. and that two-way relationship that happens between the agencies that are doing that and primary care. And of course, all of this has got a link to workforce in terms of capacity and capability. So it links to the other priority as well. And then because I get the opportunity to say this, I also am going to put my fourth priority on the table for everyone to have a think about, because I have said this directly to the advisory group as well, but I am really concerned that we're not starting to look at thinking about what are the indicators that we're going to use as a sector to track our progress and see whether we are making a positive difference in the lives of people living with dementia. I worry that we're taking the steps in the specific areas without looking at that question about what are the 4 or 5 indicators that we collectively think we should be monitoring. That is something that we could be doing now in terms of identifying those indicators. It doesn't require money, although there may well be some money and implementation to make that difference. But that does seem to be something that I would like to see added into the mix. So I haven't taken 6 minutes. So my colleagues in the navigation group, anything you'd like to add?
No, okay. 6 minutes
Oh,
is
sorry.
not mandatory. Leslie.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we always, when I was studying, it was KISS, keep it simple, Stu. You know, just keep it simple. And like Catherine said, let's not make this so difficult, so that the navigation, you know, pulling it back into the navigation, so that navigation is simple for them, for everyone, family, caregivers. We have services out there. You know, we have great services out there, and we need to pull them all together so that the navigation is made easier. That's all.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Leslie. So we will move on now to Māori perspectives.
Kia ora whānau. I talk the most, so I get to be the person that presents.
Yeah.
Kia ora. Ko putau aki te maunga o hine mataroa te awa, ko Ngāti Awa te iwi, ko Patuai te hapu, ko Maria Clark taku ingoa. I sit on the Eastern Bay of Plenty Alzheimer's board with some very, very lovely people. So, kia ora tātou. So, 6 minutes is probably more than enough time for us. So the key thing that, because we took the kōrero approach, as you do, and just talked about how it is for Māori out in the community looking after their whānau who have mate wareware. So the key theme for us was whānau, looking after whānau in their home. So the general framework for Māori is that once the diagnosis has been confirmed, we call a hui. Everybody comes across the country to that hui, and we decide who's going to be the primary carer. And it's usually, not always, but it's usually the person that has the least to lose. And that's usually the pōtiki of the whānau, who's the youngest of the whānau. So we go, you're it, and they stay with our parents until our parents pass on. The success of that model is about how well we resource that person as a whānau and how much knowledge we have about accessing things. So we decided in our hui that there are some key things that we need to support the pōtiki. The chosen one is what we call them. The first thing is ensuring that carer burnout is recognised and there's respite for the carer. The second one is finances, ensuring that, you know, they're well supported with money from God knows where. But we did have some suggestions that one day we might pull MSD to the table, who have supported living, and pull also together the NASC team who allocate the hours. And that combination of people sitting at the table gives you a funding pool of up to $700. Let's drop that in the carer's lap, keep them tight, keep them happy. And then the third thing we talked about were resources, ensuring that they had access to resources, ensuring that they knew everything there is to know about what's accessible in that community, what kaumātua programs are out there, how they access them, how transportation happens for them. There was just a number of things. And then and then we talked about, actually, I think we might have covered most of it. Cheryl, team, help me out here. Do you think we covered most of it, Cheryl?
Well, yeah, pretty much so, Maria. The other thing was having sufficient knowledge or information to care, for the whānau or the pōtiki or the named one, to care for their kuia, karawa, auntie, uncle. So accessing that information, having ability to be given it in a way that actually is suitable.
Yeah, we talked about how long that process is from diagnosis to passing to the next realm, and how many years that could be or could not be, and depending on the level of care that you're providing, it could be more than 5, but less than 5, depending on where you catch them in that stage. And if the pōtiki is going to be looking after our parents for that amount of time, then we would be very clever to push them through any kind of training that we possibly can. So the outcome that you would measure is, did they live a good life? Did they die a good death? The pōtiki left that area with a knowledge kete of learned things, certificates, whatever, so that they can go on to be, and I plucked this out of there, a doctor. So yeah, so that was the kōrero from our group.
Kia ora. That very rich information in that. Thank you, Maria. And Cheryl, that was great. So now we're going to move on to the young onset.
Kia ora, everybody. My name's Daryl Campbell. I'm the CEO of Dementia Canterbury. I'm going to try and summarise what took place in our group. We talked initially about what was identified last time, and I wasn't present for that meeting, which was a notion around an intermediate step between suspected and confirmed younger onset diagnosis, given that for many people it takes quite a long time to get a diagnosis, and there's a period where there's no access to support without a diagnosis. We talked about the inequity of the postcode lottery, i.e. Some people have the ability to access good younger onset services. Some people have the ability to access no younger onset support services, and therefore may get a diagnosis in isolation from any support. We talked about the need to do a stock take of what's actually working well in the younger onset arena across the mutu, and to look at how we might share or enable what's working well to be spread and delivered across all of our regions, with particular acknowledgement of the difficulties in accessing in rural and smaller communities. Canterbury's developed quite a big service that was mentioned in the last meeting, I understand, And coincidentally, we're on the cusp of launching a piece of research about our program here in the region that's been up and running for 4 years, which we'd really like to share across the Mutu and get feedback on. And there are other programs, certainly ours is not exclusive. So hopefully that will come to everybody very soon anyway. One of the things of equal importance is that it was important to identify what good service would look like, but it was equally important to look at what would it take to fund that service, because in the area of younger onset there is virtually no funding, no specific funding of note to support initiatives, even if there is a will and a desire and real passion to create services. So getting costings, getting a sense of how would we address the inequities across our populations, including Māori and Pacifica, where people are not presenting because the services are not appropriate for their needs. So how do we develop a younger onset suite of services across the country that can be inclusive, that actually address the challenge of diagnosis not happening in isolation, address the fact that not every area has a specialist, and work with sharing what has worked well and how to fund what's worked well to be more across the Mutu.
Thank you. That's very good. Thank you. Okay, so the next group is, there was no one in the dual diagnosis group, so aged care.
Kia ora everyone. Ko Jane Large, tauko ingoa. I am a project manager in the South Island for Health of Older People and do in my day job lots of projects related to improving things for people with dementia. The current one is end of life care for people with dementia. So I didn't know what group to join, but I joined the aged care group and essentially facilitated a discussion. They had been a list of, I'd say, about 10 things, ideas that had come up with last time, which we talked about, and most of those took a lot of money and we couldn't do anything now. They would need work on. So it was things like using the inter-eye assessment tool to better effect for people with dementia. That would be training now, and it would also be possibly looking at changing the tool in the future, and we all accept that that's a big job. So there was lots of things like that, but there was one that stood out, and it was around workforce development, education for the aged care workforce. There are many, many issues for them, and welfare is one of them, many issues. And so the welfare portion would need some funding and being aligned to the education program. But there are challenges with so much information on lots of different websites and not even knowing about some of the great education material that's available both within New Zealand and in Australia. There's things right there. So we felt that using what's available right now, but breaking that down and making it more accessible, but more easily understood. So if it was in like topic areas, so that if you had an issue, common issue across New Zealand with, say, I'm just going to say managing challenging behaviour, you would go to the website and be able to find the education quickly, and education and other resources quickly and easily. We felt like we wanted practical, not abstract, so tools that are available to help make things easier for the staff to do a better, so they're better equipped to support more professionally and comprehensively. So we had some ideas of tools in New Zealand, but we think that this has got we can do it now. We can do some of these things right now, working together and across the motu. And then there are things that we might need to be investing in to improve it. So anybody from the aged care group, do you have anything to add? Good. That was about 2 minutes, wasn't it, Stephen?
3.5. Thank you, Jane. All right, primary care.
I think I've been volunteered. Is it? Oh, somebody else want to talk? That's great if you do.
Whichever. Hi, we can both do it together. Hi, everyone. My name's Angela. I work for East Health Trust PHO. I was in group of primary healthcare, and we had a good representative across our chat group where we had a lot of people. We had about 6 members who from Taupo, Metro Auckland, Northern Ireland, and 1 from Sutherland. And they're a mix of nurse practitioners, hip and health coach, health improvement practitioners, nurses, and specialty personnel in this particular role in relation to dementia, and some PHA representatives. So it was a good mix of knowledge. And what we came up with is we kind of addressed like the background of the current issues in primary health care, and we looked at it as in there was 3 major points that came out for us for the issues at current, and it was primary health care model at current doesn't really work for the patients with dementia, given that we've said that it was more coming from an episodic care rather than a long-term planned care. We spoke about the other thing about funding mechanisms, that wasn't sufficient, and that led into the 3rd issue, which was the current comprehensive assessment tools. The care tools are, you've got 2 parts to it, the frailty and the cognition part, and they kind of overlap, but that takes up a lot of time for general practice, and so hence the reason why we need to then look back at the primary health care model. We thought about solutions in regards to this, and the group came up with such as data sharing, like making it easier for our assessment tools from referrals, making it easier for the assessments to capture all that comprehensive information from the patient, and that could potentially help with earlier diagnosis as well for dementia patients. We spoke about the workforce knowledge and development that needs to be looked at as well in terms of the general practice in the primary healthcare sector, that we need more practice nurses getting involved in other sectors, other professionals taking up skills and training for the dementia assessments. And we talked about funding again, that all leads to it. That's a big issue as well. That comes up quite a few times. Yeah, is there anything else you'd like to add, Gemma, that I've missed?
Not that you've missed. I think that's a great summary. Thank you. I think it's interesting listening to the other groups as well, because we are all saying similar kind of things, that we need funding. I think there's generalized kind of agreement that earlier diagnosis is important. So I come from a secondary care background. I work for Whai. However, I've been involved in the Northern Region Dementia Framework around how can secondary care support primary care to do earlier diagnosis, which is why I joined the primary care group. And so some of the other things that we were talking about as well is around the use of digital technology and AI, because one of the barriers is around the time that it takes for primary care and therefore the cost to the person. So is there some way that we can look to make, as we were saying, to make this simpler? Can we use some AI that can pull some of the information across and pre-populate, and can we set up a kind of little work stream or group that could look into the possibilities of what that could look like, and if it would indeed speed up the admin time associated with all of the things that are required. And we talked about that primary care is not just GPs, so what can we do to kind of open up the kind of knowledge and skill base across primary care, so pharmacists, things like that. And it's all about people having access and knowledge to the diagnosis and to the diagnostics, what is needed, and having that mechanism to feed back. And I think the other point that we made was around the pressures that are on secondary care at the moment across the board. And I think there's general agreement that we need to kind of lift up primary care as well to be able to support people who may have known their GP for many years for the earlier diagnosis, but there is still a place for secondary care, and we really need to make sure that that network and that kind of link across is still there, so that people in primary care can get the support that they need in terms of the more complex, or, you know, and I think the last thing is that it needs to be consistent across the country. And what do we do about rural communities and that kind of thing? How do we make sure that that people in rural communities have got the same access as people in the urban centres around the country? So that's something we could look at. What are we doing, and what's working well, and can we translate that to other areas to make a more regionalised, more nationalised approach? Anything else?
No, that sounds great. Thanks, Gemma. The only thing I would add is, like, in terms of data share, a lot of the, like, within the PHO sector, I do know that a lot of practices do struggle with, they all use different PMS systems to capture patient information. And so with that, that's the complexity of, you know, combining all that to get a collective assessment. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Angela and Gemma. The next group is therapeutic.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Charles, work for Alzheimer's in North Otago. We had a very small group. We had two main ideas come out of that under the broad heading of access, and a lot of people have been speaking about access in a broad sense as being an issue, you know, across the board. So, and we specifically looking at it in terms of workforce development. There were two main ideas. One that was very broad and one that was very specific. The broad one was around that there needs to be a multidisciplinary approach to therapies, and that there are models overseas that work really well, where you've got sort of pretty well everyone, you know, one of sort of every kind of practitioner in the one spot to be able to provide support to whoever needs it, no matter what their diagnosis and no matter what their support needs are. The other idea, which was more specific, was around the model that already exists, you know, for CST. It is great. There's a lot of evidence to show that CST works, but it is often only that short-term program, and that sometimes, for whatever reason, usually funding and things like that, that the maintenance program isn't provided long-term for people, and that is something that can be done quite at low cost. I think the maintenance part of a CST approach, or some other type of program that provides support for as long as the person needs it, you know, until they, you know, are no longer able to, you know, interact with that kind of program. So yeah, that's pretty well it in a nutshell. Or Katia, do you have anything else to add?
Hi everyone, how are you doing? I think in the discussions with Charles and Matthew, for us, is about having a variety of opportunities for people to access and not just limitations. So I gave them an example about a place that I have recently visited in the United States, where they have this really good multidisciplinary approach. So they have senior centers in which they have an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, and a speech therapist, and recreational therapists all working together. And families are welcome to bring along their loved ones, but it's not just limited to one allied health professional, or they actually don't get to see, in the case of the person living with dementia, you know, compromise on just one domain, like, okay, the speech therapist or the physiotherapist or the occupational therapist, but they do have a true multidisciplinary approach. It is accessible. We are obviously talking about funding, and the example that I am giving you from the United States doesn't apply to New Zealand, because we don't have the funding for all these allied health professionals to work together. We might have only funding for them to access a few hours of OT or a few hours of physio, but actually there is no funding for recreational therapy out there, which is quite sad. But when I think about my own profession and I reflect on that example, I thought we have recreational therapists that can potentially be working in the community, and they did this in the West Coast DHB a while ago. They got funding, the funding finished, they couldn't do it anymore. And a recreational therapist might be trained on different modalities. So they might know about how to develop a music program, but they will still get the supervision of a music therapist. How to develop an art program. They might still get the input from an art therapist. They might be trained on cognitive stimulation therapy, on the Ronnie Gardner method. So you will have an allied health that will be using different modalities that someone can access to the community, or you can have these type of allied health working in the community that families can come and they are working as part of a social prescription model with allied health professionals. So I'm thinking funding, low cost, accessibility for families, better equipped professionals, and working together instead of still working on silos, which is the main reason of why we're here today, basically. So those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, both of you. And the last group is community services.
Hi, I feel a bit like one of the previous speakers for Māori. I talked the most, so I ended up being presenter. Please, everyone in my group pitch in, because I'm not sure I've captured it all well. We are looking at community support. We felt that something that we could do now was stop thinking about needing a formal dementia diagnosis in order to access support, but instead just focus on the idea of cognitive loss. We noted that the NASC Inter-I gives us a cognitive loss score of 1 or 2, and we think that entry into community support should be at cognitive loss level 1, and that may help facilitate earlier access to support. We also recognise that that people living alone with a dementia are probably probably one of the most vulnerable populations, and they are dependent on episodic, often quite rushed, task-orientated home care support services. And what is needed is more oversight, in Wellington, where I work, we have probably what is a fairly unique service. We have a Te Whatu Ora funded longer term social work / community support work service. And we work with people who live alone. The earlier we live alone with a dementia or with another infirmity that makes them at risk of needing residential care. But when someone needs to find out whether the bills are getting paid, whether the shopping is getting done, whether they're eating all right, and that takes sort of very regular sort of oversight and navigation, and most navigation type support services are with whānau where a member is living with dementia. So we wanted to focus in on living alone. We felt that we could we could develop a more information sharing culture to around what works in community support, and that might and that would be helpful. We recognise that changing the model of home care support services to put more allied health in, put social work in, and be a longer term thing is going to take some funding. But I think we're quite a lean service, and we managed to do a lot with social work and community support work. So I think it'd be good to share that model. The other thing that we talked about was carer support groups, what's working, how to collaborate on what's working across the country so that we can start to disseminate what best practice looks like. And we also spoke about what we can do now with workforce development is access the education, the education, online education that is already available. There's great stuff on the New Zealand Dementia Foundation website. There's also the MOOC, the University of Tasmania MOOC, which is really good for helping support workers and social workers and other allied health people who end up in community support roles to learn about dementia. And what else, team? What else did we talk about?
Hi, we also talked about supporting the informal carers as well, helping educate them and support them and prevent carer burnout, a bit like the Maori group did as well.
Yep. I
Okay.
think that's it for us.
Okay. Thank you. Well, you were all very succinct and all came within time. So we've got to where this part slightly early. And I'll now hand over to Shireen to summarise and finish the day.
Thanks, Stephen. A huge thank you to all of you for all the work you've done today and for all the work you've done since the ecosystem was set up. There's only been 4 network meetings in that time since last October, but you've worked so hard in each of them and we've achieved so much. As Susan laid out in her PowerPoint at the beginning, you know, we have set a vision, we have set priorities, and now we're talking about what actions need to be taken. So the Leadership and Advisory Group have a really solid bank of advice to work with from you. And remember, this is just the beginning. This work of advising will continue, but also we need to develop how the network can work together to achieve the implementation of the action plan, to help support that process. I mean, Gemma earlier talked about setting up a work stream to, I think, work towards streamlining information flows. You know, our hope in the Dementia Foundation is that the network can work like that. We can have work streams that will work on particular issues, that you will be the reference group for the work that is going to continue. You've presented important ideas today, and our team will collect all of those and create a briefing paper for the leadership group. If you feel as though you haven't been able to say, I think everyone felt comfortable with what they wanted to say today, but if you feel as though you've got something more to add that you would like to add to that briefing paper, then email Bevan Morgan at the Dementia Foundation. His email is on the invitations that you get. Remember, we already have your comprehensive notes from the last meeting. So if there's anything new that came up for you today, send it through if you want to. We'll let you know when the briefing paper is ready. We'll email you and we'll post it on the website. And that will stand as the network's advice on what you think the next steps are for implementing the action plan. As far as the next meeting goes, as you know, we meet about every 6 weeks, but we've brought that, excuse me, the next meeting together forward to avoid the school holidays. We still have to confirm that date, but we'll do that shortly. But we hope it will be 1 to 2:30 p.m. on Thursday, the 28th of June. We try to keep the meetings consistent in the mornings at the same time, so people don't get confused. But we needed to change it to the afternoon this time because we want to bring you a special session about recent work on culturally appropriate ways of working with and assessment for kaumātua, living with mati maruari. There are a number of people working in that area, and we hope to have some of them at the next meeting. I'll now ask Teresa to farewell us all and karakia.
Tēnā koutou. I'm once again want to thank you for your generosity in participating in the network, and hope to see you all at the next one. And ka mutu taku inoi, unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia māma, te ngākau, te tinana, te wairua i te ara tangata. Hoi ara e rongo, whakairia ake ki runga, kia tina, hui e tākia, which is a different one from on the screen.
Sorry about that.
Ka kite anō.
Kia kite.